Hello, my beautiful grief growers, and welcome to another Facebook Live Monday. I'm so excited to be with you here in my home office, just hanging out. We've got a candle going. My cat's on my floor next to my feet. And today we're going to be doing a little bit more swearing than we normally do, because we're going to be talking about something that's hard, something called making apologies, making amends. And yes, there is grief involved in this, which is really wild, really cool. And has to do with both our lives with the living and our lives with the dead. So this topic kind of has been floating around in my mind for a while, and it's tied in with grief in a lot of ways. But I was having a conversation with my roommate a couple of months ago, and we were talking about how sometimes people are in denial in terms of their humanity. There are people who exist in the world who feel like they can never hurt anybody, they've never hurt anybody, and there's got to be some ownership taken in that, as in, I'm an asshole, you're an asshole, and we just all have this capacity to hurt people, and so sometimes apologies need to be made. I received a letter in the past 2 weeks, actually a message on Facebook from somebody who used to be a very, very close friend of mine, especially through high school and a bit of college, and she had brought up a conversation that we had years ago, almost 7 years ago now, where she was in a depressive episode, and I didn't understand. I was in a spot where we had had conversations about her depression multiple times. I was working through my own griefs in my life, but basically we ended the conversation and ultimately ended the intimacy of our friendship in one moment when I was texting her. This was a text conversation, and I said, "I'm sorry, you're a lost cause. I can no longer help you. You are a lost cause to me. I give up." And this was a very dramatic, a very stark shift in our relationship, and we continued to talk after this, but even I could feel that we weren't as close as we were. And she sent me this message because she said this has impacted her for the last 7 years of her life or so. She said, to know in that moment, you not only hurt me, but you confirmed my worst fears about my depression, about my anxiety, about my mental health, that everyone in my life thinks I'm somehow a lost cause. And 7 years later, receiving this message and looking at it, I'm like, oh my God, I remember this conversation. I remember the feeling that I had delivering it, and I said it out of anger and out of ignorance and so many other things, but I also know, doing the grief work that I'm doing now, the radical impact that something like calling somebody a lost cause can have. And it just cut me right through to the heart. And she didn't bring up this conversation recently to take a stab at me, to bring me down, but just to say, hey, I haven't been able to forget this, and it would mean a lot to me if we could talk about it. It was kind of the general gist of her message, and it was really powerful to have that conversation with her. So I wanted to share with all of you, because it's so important to say we're sorry, because in that moment I recognized that I was an asshole. In that moment I recognized that what I said was wrong, it was inappropriate, it was hurtful, and it had, I don't want to say lifelong, but it had long-term implications, consequences that happened as a result of that. And so this week on the podcast, I'm kind of embracing this fact that we're all human, we're all assholes at some point or another, and we're going to have to make apologies to people. And there's grief involved. There's so much grief involved, because we can act like assholes when we're grieving. We can act like assholes out of ignorance, and we haven't experienced grief yet. We can act like assholes out of anger because of grief or not because of grief. And yeah, we all need to learn these human skills, these life skills, just a little bit better. And so I kind of have this list over here I'll pull out. There are 3 things on the podcast this week that I wanted to mention not to do when you're making apologies. I'm kind of going to clear the slate, start from a good foundation, do some course correction. Before we actually get into how to make a proper apology, I want to note on how to not apologize, because I see this happening very often. So the first thing that you don't want to do is defend yourself. If somebody comes up to you and says, hey, you hurt me, or hey, I think I deserve an apology, or hey, this thing happened and I feel like we need to talk about it, don't meet them with a wall. Don't meet them with excuses or reasons why, or a list of logical reasons, either why you did what you did, or why you were right, or why this is superior, or why this was following the rules, or why. So we can build all these walls of defense as to why what we said was correct, why what we said was valid, why what we said shouldn't have hurt the other person, instead of just being open, being receptive and listening. So first rule is don't jump to defend yourself. Second rule of making apologies is saying, I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't hurt you, or I didn't mean to hurt you. Do not invalidate somebody else's experience by telling them that their pain is not real. Don't invalidate somebody's experience by saying, oh, I didn't mean to do that, and so it's okay. Or, I didn't hurt you. Like that's not how that came off. That's not what I meant. That's not how it came out of my mouth. That automatically invalidates the other person's experience and tells them that you don't care, that you don't believe them, and that you're not interested in working on it further. And that may be how you feel, but that's not how to open a relationship and keep a relationship with them going. I despise Louis C.K. now, especially with everything that's come out in the news, but there's a quote that he's famous for that says, when somebody tells you that you hurt them, you don't get to decide that you didn't. Whether or not people are hurt is something that they experience personally, and that's really, really powerful. And for you to invalidate for them their own emotions is something that comes up a lot in grief too, is, oh, you're not sad, how can you still be grieving, things like that. Same kind of thing applies with apologies here. People can't come to you and say, I'm hurting, I feel I need an apology from you, this was painful for me, and you say, oh no, it wasn't. That's an invalidation of their experience. So that's the second thing not to do. Third thing not to do with apologies is to make excuses. And this is similar to not defending yourself, not putting up a wall, but there's a different energy here too. There's kind of an avoidant energy, like a sidestepping energy that comes with making excuses. So defending yourself is, I'm going to meet you with an argument. And making excuses is more like, well, I have this going on in my life. I'm experiencing this. I have XYZ that are not working in my favor right now, and so I'm tending to lash out. Or I was intoxicated. Or I just got off the phone with this person who is a trigger for me, and all these other things. And it sidesteps this conversation of acknowledging that you did something or said something that hurt somebody else, and just saying, I have a reason why that was okay. It automatically, again, it makes you seem like you're not interested in the conversation, you're not interested in making an apology, and you're not interested in taking some personal responsibility, which is really valuable when you're making an apology. So first, don't meet them with a wall of logic. Second, don't tell them that their hurt, their pain is not valid or real, or that you didn't mean to. And three, don't defend yourself. So things that you do want to do when you make an apology to someone is first, just like grief. When you found out somebody has lost someone, when you found out that someone is in pain, when you found out that somebody is hurting, and it was at your hands or at your words, say you're sorry. Meet them with, I'm sorry. I hurt you, I'm so sorry. I see this now, I'm sorry. If it's been a while since you've talked, just like me and this friend who have not really spoken too much in the last 7 years or so, say, this has been on my mind a lot, and I want to bring it up, and I'm so sorry that this happened. I'm so sorry that I did or said this to you. If they're approaching you after a long time, say, thank you for bringing this up. I can't, imagine how hard it's been to continue to have this on your mind. I'm so sorry. Open with that. Always open with, I'm so sorry, because it's a door opener for the rest of the conversation. You're acknowledging some pain caused here on your front. Second, tell the truth of your situation, but put it into context. This helps frame kind of what was going on when things were happening, and this is similar to making excuses and similar to defending yourself, but it has that different energy. So defending yourself looks like this, and making excuses looks like this. It's like a sidestep, but speaking in context of what happened is kind of like gathering a lot of information together and being like, here's what I was going through at that time. Here's how I work this out for myself in my mind. Here's the logical steps I took in my brain to make this conclusion, and I see now that it wasn't what you were thinking, and I'm sorry. So this requires some thought on your part. It's not as easy as defending yourself, and it's not as easy as making excuses. You have to, and it might take some time, because you have to put some holistic perspective in here. You really have to sit with why you did what you did, why you think the way you think, and why you said what you said. It involves a lot of self-questioning. So you can't just come at somebody with context. You really have to create it for yourself before you can show up with it. And the last thing that you want to do is to thank them for opening this conversation with you. If somebody's coming to you and saying, this hurts, I'm in pain, I think it was because of something you did, I feel I deserve an apology, I'm still carrying this around, thank you for bringing this up. Thank you for engaging in this conversation with me. Thank you for wanting to be a part of this with me. I'm seeing how this hurt you. I recognize how that came off. I hear your pain in this. So thanking, acknowledging, recognizing, and then saying, I'm so sorry. I want to talk about this further. Just this increased energetic of opening this conversation. So there's 3 not to do's, 3 to do's for apologizing. These are all featured in the podcast this week, but I want to kind of circle around and bring this back to grief, back to relationships we have with people. And there's a couple of caveats with apologies. So the first caveat, obviously, is if you're in an abusive or toxic relationship with somebody, if you're actually in an abusive or violent relationship, or if you're just in kind of a toxic relationship where people like to hold on to things to use against you for later. So people who enjoy being resentful, people who enjoy having ammo, or people who enjoy having the power of having something to hold over your head. This is really important with apologies, because while everyone quote unquote deserves an apology, not everybody should be receiving apologies from you in the same way. So if you're in an abusive or a toxic relationship, get out ASAP. And this might require the work of a counselor, professional, somebody who's not me, somebody who can physically be there with you and could get you to safety in this relationship, or in a place where you can make apologies from a safe distance. And this might require not being face to face, as in cases of restraining orders or estrangement, or being apart, physically apart. So things like sending an apology. I'm sorry, I'm getting battery notices on my phone as this is coming up. Gotta make it fast. Things like sending letters through the mail might have to be an option for you. Sending emails, sending messages privately on Facebook or other messaging platforms where you can make an apology from a distance. I'm so sorry this happened. If people like to use anger as ammo against you, I would say use a 2-touch approach. Approach once. Say, I'm so sorry for the thing that I did. I recognize that it hurt you. I would love to talk this more. If you're met with anger, if you're met with excuses, if you're met with them needing to hold it over your head, if you're met with somebody who wants to keep this tight and on lock, try one more time. Wait a week. Say, have you read this thing that I sent you? Did you hear me when I say I wanted to apologize and open up this further? I want to say again that I'm so sorry and I want to work on this for our future. If you're met again with hostility, back off. Both of these might be cases where you have to make an apology from a distance energetically, where you call their energy into your space and say, I'm sorry that I did this to your spirit, because spirits can receive what humans can't. And this gets a little bit esoteric, spiritual, woo-woo for a moment, but this applies with death too. This is the second caveat I have for you. If people are dead or gone out of our lives and we're no longer able to verbalize or write to them the same way that we would, our only choice is to make apologies energetically. And this is calling their spirit into our space, making lists, writing down, having lists in our head of the things that we want to apologize for, and then either verbalizing it or writing it down or making a ceremony out of it somehow. There's a ritual here that you can use for apologies. This is where the grief recovery method was very helpful for me, but to have this power of calling somebody into your space and really sitting with them and recognizing that they're there in front of you and saying, I am so sorry, for big stuff and little stuff. I'm so sorry I called you a bitch in front of all your friends while you were alive. I'm so sorry that I threw away that gift of pink socks that you got me for Christmas because I didn't like the color pink at the time. I'm sorry I never told you how proud I was of you. Anything, big, small, what have you. It applies to death as well. And that's really important in our grief, because so much of what we hold on to in grief is either not getting to say we're sorry or not getting the I'm sorry's that we miss so much from the people who are gone in our lives, whether it was big I'm sorry's or little I'm sorry's, whatever they are for us. So there's a lot here in apologies. There's a lot here. So what I really wanted to do this week is supply you with some tips, some to-dos, some not to-dos, some insight on why apologies are so hard for us to make. We want to be right. We want to be superior. We don't want to be seen or see ourselves as people that are capable of hurting others. But guess what, grief growers? I'm an asshole. You're an asshole. We're all going to give up on people at some point. We're all going to get frustrated with them. We're all going to yell at them. We're going to hurt people. We are all humans, and that causes grief and it causes conflict in relationships. But there are ways to approach this where we can grow from them and not continue to block or sidestep or invalidate, not even refuse to see people's experiences. There are so many ways to see people in their pain, to bring context into our own reactions, and to continue to love people through this pain, through this grief, through the assholery. So I thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you'll tell us who you need to apologize to or when an apology's gone really well for you in the comments below. And you can always, always, always find more about every single Facebook Live on the week's podcast. So I put a link to that in the notes for this little Facebook Live today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week.